Pisa, 1198. Sunlight glittered on the Arno River as young Leonardo Bonacci stepped onto the quay from the galley ship. The bracing, salt-laced air carried the familiar cacophony of Pisa's port, the shouts of stevedores, the haggling of merchants. His journey from Bajaya in North Africa had been arduous, but the leather-bound bundles clutched in his arms felt heavier with significance than mere physical weight. One codex stood apart. Its worn binding bore simple, stark lettering, Liber Zerus, the Book of the Cipher, or more ominously, the Book of Zero. Fibonacci ran his fingers over the cover, recalling the hushed reverence his tutors used when speaking of the concepts within. In the shadowed study rooms where he'd absorbed the wisdom of masters tracing their lineage to Al-Khwarizmi, he had glimpsed something revolutionary. He carefully opened the book, just enough to see the strange symbols, the Hindu-Arabic numerals, mingling with geometric diagrams and cryptic Latin annotations. This was more than a novel method of calculation. The cipher zero was not the void, the terrifying emptiness his European contemporaries instinctively distrusted. It wasn't the devil's mark whispered about in fearful corners of churches. It was a foundation, a gateway, a concept that could unlock entirely new realms of thought. Decades later, near the famously leaning tower, its construction recently resumed after the unstable ground had seemingly settled, Fibonacci convened a clandestine meeting. 5 trusted scholars leaned over a rough table scattered with charts and instruments. At the center, treated with the reverence usually afforded sacred texts, lay the Liber Zerus. The knowledge preserved here, Fibonacci stated, his voice low despite their seclusion, changes the very nature of understanding. His finger traced the circular symbol for zero. The cipher is not absence. It is the fulcrum upon which quantity pivots, the origin from which magnitude extends infinitely in all directions. To truly comprehend it is to touch the underlying structure of reality. A younger scholar, his face etched with caution, shifted uneasily. The church is wary. These numerals are associated with infidels, with arcane practices. Precisely, Fibonacci affirmed, his eyes reflecting the flickering lamp flame. Such power, if misunderstood or misused, could unravel the very fabric of society. It represents a responsibility too great for common knowledge, yet too vital to lose. He met each scholar's gaze. It must be guarded, studied in secret, its truths disseminated only with wisdom and profound caution. We shall be its custodians. We are the Ordo Numeri, the order of numbers. A heavy silence descended, charged with the voltage of discovery and the chilling weight of their self-imposed duty. Our purpose, Fibonacci declared, is twofold: preserve this divine arithmetic, this sacred geometry, and ensure it serves creation, not chaos. As the scholars murmured their solemn assent, none could truly grasp how their vow would ripple through centuries, nor how the potent knowledge they guarded would eventually sow the seeds of schism within their own ranks. Generations of the Ordo Numeri maintained their vigil. They met in sequestered monastery libraries, in hidden university chambers, beneath observatory domes on moonless nights. Members painstakingly copied manuscripts, debated interpretations, and analyzed the cryptic diagrams and equations derived from Fibonacci's legacy and the Liber Zerus. Over time, 2 distinct philosophies subtly diverged, then hardened into opposing factions. In the Free Republic Florence, centered around figures seeking cosmic harmony, members pored over celestial charts and architectural blueprints, believing mathematics revealed nature's perfect, unchanging design, the divine proportion, the music of the spheres. They sought to reflect this harmony. Meanwhile, in the pragmatic, academically competitive environment of the University of Bologna, adepts delved into complex algebraic manipulations. Their focus shifted towards application, towards solving intractable problems. They saw mathematics less as passive reflection and more as an active tool, a means to exert influence, perhaps even control. The allure of unlocking new powers hidden within the numbers, hinted at in the more obscure passages of the Liber Zirus, proved dangerously seductive. Sunlight streamed through the tall, arched windows of a Florentine academy, illuminating the dynamic figure of Fra Luca Pacioli. The Franciscan friar, a master of mathematics and perspective, addressed a rapt audience, his hands sculpting invisible forms in the air. And thus, proportion is not merely an aesthetic choice, it is a dialogue with the divine. The golden ratio, the sextio aurea, resonates in the unfurling fern, the chambers of the nautilus, the very architecture of the human form. As the ancients understood, the absolute ever geometrizes. Among the listeners, artists, philosophers, patrons, sat a man whose intense gaze missed nothing, Leonardo da Vinci. His fingers danced across his notebook, sketching not just Pacioli's examples, but extrapolating, twisting the geometric forms into new, complex iterations. Pacioli gestured warmly towards him. My brilliant friend, Messer Leonardo, grasps this innately. His art strives not merely to imitate nature, but to unveil the mathematical soul beneath the surface. Leonardo inclined his head, a ghost of a smile acknowledging their shared fascination with the deeper structures of reality, a knowledge that transcended the public lecture. They were both initiates of the Ordo Numeri. That evening, Leonardo followed Pacioli through shadowed monastery cloisters to the friar's private study. Bolting the door, Pacioli lit extra candles before revealing a hidden compartment behind a row of theological texts. The order has guarded these fragments for generations, Pacioli murmured, carefully laying out several aged manuscripts. Leonardo recognized the clear hand of Fibonacci on some pages, while others contained annotations and complex equations derived from the legendary Liber Zirus. Leonardo's finger traced a particularly intricate spiral. This balance you speak of, Luca, it feels precarious. These equations hint at concepts, quantities that seem to negate existence itself, like holding infinity in the palm of your hand. A single misstep in reasoning. Which is why discipline, wisdom, and reverence are paramount, Pacioli interrupted gently, arranging the manuscripts with care. We must use this divine ratio, these perfect solids, this mathematical beauty to elevate humanity, to reinforce harmony. That is the path. He spoke of his desire to perhaps form an inner circle within the Ordo, focused purely on this harmonious application. A quiet, precise knock echoed through the heavy door. Pacioli's expression tightened momentarily before he called, "Enter." A thin young man, perhaps barely 20, entered with a startling economy of movement. His dark eyes possessed an unnerving depth and intensity. He bowed respectfully. "Ah, Scipione," Pacioli said, his tone regaining its warmth, though a flicker of unease remained. "Master Leonardo, allow me to introduce Scipione del Ferro, a student from Bologna. His aptitude for calculation is remarkable, almost preternatural." "Fra Pacioli is generous," Del Ferro replied, his voice soft yet carrying an unexpected weight. "I merely seek the truths hidden within numbers." Pacioli placed a hand on the young man's shoulder, a gesture meant as guidance but perhaps also restraint. "And truth must be pursued with wisdom, my son. Remember, knowledge without proportion, like calculation without ethical grounding, can lead only to dissonance." Leonardo observed the exchange, noting the subtle tension, the almost hungry look in Del Ferro's eyes as they glanced towards the manuscripts, quickly veiled. He filed away the impression of a brilliant mind potentially unmoored from the principles Pacioli held dear. Years later, Bologna's narrow streets glistened under a cold rain. A cloaked figure moved purposefully through the darkness, hood pulled low. Cesare Borgia, ruthless strategist and illegitimate son of Pope Alexander VI, officially reported dead after escaping Spanish imprisonment, now operated from the shadows, seeking restoration to power through less conventional means than papal armies. He paused outside a dimly lit tavern frequented by university scholars, then slipped inside, melting into the crowd seeking refuge from the miserable night. In a secluded corner, a balding Scipione del Ferro sat hunched over scattered papers, muttering algebraic notations. As vision failed, his fingers obsessively traced and retraced symbols related to the cubic equation, the seemingly unsolvable problem that had consumed him for years. A formidable intellect wrestling with angels, or perhaps with deeper complexities, a smooth, cultured voice inquired. Del Ferro started, looking up into the eyes of the stranger who now stood beside his table. There was an unnerving intelligence, a predatory stillness about him. "You know of this problem?" Del Ferro asked, instinctively shielding his calculations. "I know of many things overlooked by conventional minds." Borgia slid onto the bench opposite him without invitation. "Tell me, Master Del Ferro, do you believe equations merely describe the world, or might they, if properly understood, command it?" Del Ferro regarded the stranger with suspicion, yet also a flicker of intense curiosity. "Mathematics must reflect the divine harmony." "A comforting nursery rhyme," Borgia scoffed softly, leaning closer. "Some have developed alternative interpretations, apocryphal texts, perhaps linked to the true, potent core of the Liber Xeris. They suggest that numbers are not passive descriptors, but active forces. That symbols can be invocative. That infinity is not merely divine, but malleable. An equation, Master Del Ferro, wielded with sufficient will and understanding, can reshape circumstances to the calculator's design." Del Ferro felt a cold thrill, a resonance with ambitions he'd barely dared acknowledge. "The orders speak only of beauty, of balance." "Beauty is static. Balance is constraint," Borgia whispered. "True power lies in solving, in changing, in imposing order, not merely observing it. Imagine solving the cubic not just on parchment, but influencing the very fabric of events, predicting outcomes, bending fortune itself." Their eyes met across the worn wooden table, a silent, dangerous understanding passing between them. Months bled into a year. Del Ferro's modest chamber became a shrine to his obsession. Cryptic notes supplied by Borgia, hinting at alternative interpretations of zero and infinity, lay scattered among his own frantic calculations. He drew complex diagrams incorporating the cipher in increasingly abstract, almost unsettling ways. One night, surrounded by candles arranged in a specific geometric pattern derived from a Borgia fragment, Del Ferro undertook a dangerous mental discipline, a meditative technique described as infinite division, designed to fracture conventional modes of thought and access a purer, more abstract algebraic awareness. He focused intensely, pushing his mind into the paradoxical space suggested by dividing by the conceptual zero. The edges of the room seemed to waver. Straight lines subtly buckled. His breathing became shallow, rhythmic. He felt parts of his consciousness detach, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. When he surfaced hours later, reaching for a simple memory, his own daughter's name, he found only a frustrating void. The loss was disturbing, yet overridden by the consuming imperative of the equation. The cubic beckoned, promising not harmony but mastery. Meanwhile, in France, an aging Leonardo da Vinci sketched furiously in his private notebooks. Not anatomical studies or flying machines, but fractal-like spirals growing increasingly complex, bordering on chaotic. His distinctive mirror script filled the margins, La proporzione inclinata. He sensed it across the distance, a disturbance in the mathematical resonances the Ordo, particularly Pacioli's faction, sought to safeguard. Something profound and potentially destabilizing was unfolding in Italy, connected, he felt certain, to Del Ferro. Del Ferro continued to stare at his equations, eyes alight with a feverish, triumphant clarity. Papers littered every surface, a testament to years of relentless effort. But now, illuminated by the weak dawn filtering through his window, he possessed it. The general solution to the depressed cubic equation, x3 plus mx equals n. His hand trembled, not with exhaustion, but with the magnitude of the discovery. The cost had been significant, gaps in his personal memory, a growing detachment from human concerns. He sometimes forgot to eat, sleep felt like an interruption. But the equation itself glowed in his mind, a perfect, intricate key. Unlocked, he whispered to the empty room. The phantom is made real. He felt a surge of possessive pride. But the order, Pacili, they must not know the full method, the true source of this insight. They cling to their outdated harmony. They wouldn't comprehend the necessary sacrifice, or the power it confers. With meticulous care, he encrypted the core of his solution within layers of complex mathematical riddles and seemingly unrelated observations. He would keep the true key, the underlying principle, absolutely secret. The solution existed, but its derivation remained his phantom. Soon after, Del Ferro cautiously shared fragments, disguised as challenging problems, with his student Antonio Fier. The young man, eager for advancement and recognition, accepted the cryptic problems with undisguised pride. Ponder this, Antonio, Del Ferro instructed, offering a particularly complex formulation. Within it lies a curious interplay between the cube and its roots. Useful, perhaps, for future academic justs. Fier beamed, oblivious to the profound secret he now carried partial custodianship of. A new weapon for the challenges. Thank you, master. Del Ferro watched him leave, a calculating glint in his eyes. Fier was ambitious but lacked true depth, a perfect, unwitting vessel to carry whispers of the solution into the world, diverting attention from the true source and method. It was time. Sunlight slanted through the high windows of a university hall, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. This was not a public challenge, but a tense, internal confrontation within the fractured Ordo Numeri. Scipione del Ferro stood before Luca Pacili, whose legendary intellectual fire still burned, though his physical form had grown frail. Scipione, Pacili began, his voice resonating with quiet authority. Your methods grow concerning. Rumors abound. Riddles hinting at profound discoveries, yet guarded with obsessive secrecy, shared only with favored, perhaps controllable, students. You walk a path divergent from the Order's principles. You have entertained dangerous philosophies. Pacili's gaze was sharp, sorrowful. You have delved into the forbidden aspects of the Liber Xeris, haven't you? The parts that speak not of harmony, but of invocation, of manipulating the void, of sacrificing essence for calculation. Del Ferro's face was unnervingly calm, his emotional effect seemingly flattened. I found a solution you deemed impossible. Reality itself yielded to the rigor of my numbers. Your harmony is merely a self-imposed limitation, stagnation disguised as piety. It is balance, Pacili countered, a rare passion entering his voice. The equilibrium that underpins existence. You solve one equation, Scipione, but you risk fracturing a far greater one, the very integrity of number itself. What have you traded for this solution? What pieces of yourself have you carved away? Irrelevant variables, Del Ferro stated, his voice devoid of inflection. Only the equation, the solution, holds ultimate value. Pacili looked at the man before him, the ghost of the brilliant, eager student he once knew now barely visible within this cold, calculating shell. A profound sadness washed over him. Then defend your discovery, Pacili sighed, gesturing towards a large slate. Not with cryptic riddles, but with reason. Show me this truth you value above all else. The intellectual duel commenced. Pacili argued with geometric proofs, appeals to universal ratios, the elegant architecture of classical mathematics. His chalk moved with practiced grace, weaving patterns that spoke of inherent order. Del Ferro countered with relentless algebraic logic, deploying steps derived from his cubic solution that seemed to twist the established rules. He spoke of operations that necessitated passing through negativity, of square roots of negative quantities as necessary intermediate steps. concepts that felt alien, almost profane, to Pacioli's worldview. And thus, Del Ferro concluded, sketching a final, irrefutable sequence. The root is found not solely in the realm of the tangible, but requires passage through an intermediary dimension, a reflection across the 0 point. Pacioli stared aghast. Del Ferro's logic, though complex and unsettling, appeared internally consistent, terrifyingly sound. Yet it felt fundamentally unbalanced, forced, lacking the inherent elegance Pacioli equated with divine truth. This feels like numerology, not mathematics, Pacioli whispered, deeply shaken. A manipulation, a forcing of reality, not a reflection of it. As Del Ferro finished his demonstration, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor seemed to pass through the room. On an old celestial globe in the corner, a fine crack appeared in the varnish, tracing a line across the ecliptic. Na-ontologic scar, unnoticed by any except perhaps the two men who felt the shift in the balance of things. Truth evolves, Del Ferro stated flatly. Your order, Fra Luca, failed to adapt. He turned and walked away, leaving Pacioli slumped, not only physically defeated, but intellectually and spiritually wounded. The encounter shattered the old friar's belief in the inviolable harmony he had dedicated his life to. His health, already frail, began a rapid decline soon after. Del Ferro, meanwhile, retreated further into secrecy, his solution guarded, his connection to powers like Borgia suspected but unproven. 2 years later, Leonardo da Vinci lay dying in his bedchamber at the Château du Clos en Bois. His breath was shallow, his legendary hands trembled with age and illness. King Francis I of France offered every comfort, but could not halt the inevitable. Leonardo clutched a final page from his notebook, forcing his fingers to trace the familiar mirror script. A last, coded warning for those few who might understand. Cubicus est umbra. Nullus radix sine sacrificio. The cubic is a shadow. No root without sacrifice. He knew the schism in the Ordo was now irreparable. The mathematical dissonance unleashed by Del Ferro's ambition was only the beginning. Future generations would inherit this fractured legacy, this dangerous power. The quest for harmony had been overshadowed. In Pavia, young Girolamo Cardano leaned forward, in his father's cluttered study, his eyes fixed on the letter Fazio Cardano, a respected physician and mathematician with connections reaching back to Leonardo himself, was placed before him. It had na inscription, Ordo Numeri, etched with symbols both elegant and stark. "What is it, father?" the boy asked, already captivated by the notation's potent simplicity. "A calling, perhaps to the greatest unsolved mystery in all of mathematics. They say its solution comes at a cost." The next stage of the mathematical conflict, the algebraic war for the soul of numbers, awaited its next champion, patient as only an unsolved equation can be.